Yeah. Hi everybody. Yeah, if you want to just go on a couple of slides, yeah, and go past this as well. Um, Basically, I'm just kind of talk a little bit about Fife Council's journey with regards to data maturity assessment that we'd kind of done, why we did that, a bit about the tool that we use, which we chose, which was Data Orchard, and then kind of really what I think is the more important part, which is what you do with it. What you do with the data that you get out of it, and how you can kind of take advantage of some of that data. So if you want to kind of go to the next slide. Yeah, so what kind of spurred it on for us was the city region deal was putting a lot of money into Edinburgh University to set up a big data centre. And one of the things they wanted from that was to get data from local authorities that were involved in that region. And what we experienced was that anytime we tried to kind of do something in that space, we were just getting barriers internally and issues that were preventing us from being able to kind of easily share data. It kind of felt like every time we were kind of doing a project, we were kind of having to almost like start from the beginning again. So a couple of people from Edinburgh University who are involved in the ESES stuff worked with us to try and kind of see if we could make all this stuff kind of just work a bit better. So we thought that if we looked at getting our in-house stuff in order, that would make it much easier to share externally. They recommended that we use Data Orchard as a mechanism for understanding better what was maybe happening within the organisation. And we also agreed to run a number of workshops with them to just look at some data projects and speak to the kind of people who are very much involved in kind of data management, security, and all that type of stuff. So we thought that ultimately, by doing this maturity assessment, that we would have a much better understanding and therefore be able to move through some of these issues, some of these barriers, some of these problems that we're incurring every time we try to do a data-based project. Next slide. So as I said, that Edinburgh University recommended essentially we use Data Orchard, which was great. Really quite liked it. Standardised, which is good. We weren't reinventing the wheel by creating our own kind of framework to do a maturity assessment again, which I guess you could do. Um, Very similar to what Shona was saying in terms of, you've got different levels of maturity and very good at kind of showing you how to move from one stage into another stage. It was also quite granular, so there's quite a lot of different layers that you could look at. And it was easy and quick to use. There was a very short questionnaire. It was quite easy for people to be persuaded to go and fill it in and complete it. We did have some technical issues. I don't know if other councils are similar to us in that we have some old browsers, and this caused us a few problems initially when we kind of set up, but we kind of overcame that. We didn't opt for using a paid service net, which probably would have been a good idea because I think it would have gave us additional information that we maybe didn't realize we might need. And also, it's only as good as the data that goes in. At the end of the day, when you're doing a maturity assessment, trying to make sure that what you're getting is clean and accurate is kind of critical to this. So it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve everything. You still have to be kind of quite honest with yourself in order to kind of get something out of it. So you go to the next slide. So the maturity assessment, as I said, it's kind of seven key themes. They kind of look at it slightly differently from kind of what Sean was saying, but it ties in perfectly with what Sean was saying. You're kind of it's really about kind of whether you're in an emerging learning or you're kind of developing it or you're a master of each of these kind of seven different areas. And if like it then kind of each of these breakdowns into the idea of uses. That's kind of how you're using your data within the organization, the data itself in terms of whether it's easy to access, whether it's falls into categories of things like fair or whatever. Your analysis, yeah, next slide kind of covers that. So all the other kind of techniques, how we're joining up data and how we're presenting it, how leadership understand it. That's quite kind of we think that to be quite a critical part of our assessment. We were quite interested in terms of how the organization perceived data and how it perceived it used data in order to kind of make sure that we were investing within the capability of the organization to use data more effectively. Then there was culture, which is also another kind of really interesting kind of problem I think that exists within organizations. We don't necessarily have a culture of thinking about analysis. We have a culture of capturing data in order to provide services or then reporting on those services in the forms of KPIs, but not necessarily in terms of using that data to be to shape services or to be predictive in how we do stuff. Then there's the tools, which is pretty self-explanatory. Whether we're using, modern data warehousing type products, or whether we're using R or Python or any of these other kind of stuff, if our data's integrated, if it's easy to share via APIs, or whether it's Excel spreadsheets sitting at a desktop. And then obviously the kind of skills and the capability of the organization, in terms of being able to actually do stuff with data, how easy it is to kind of access that. If you go to the next slide, this then breaks down one of the areas uses, which we'll kind of talk a wee bit about, and showing, giving you kind of good granular information to kind of hang a kind of hat on, and when you do your assessment, so you can turn around and look at it and go, well, we scored between 1 and 2 across the organisation. Does this look like it kind of represents where we sit in terms of the organisation? And then we kind of looked at, say, the next kind of parts of learning and developing, and go, well, what do we need to do in order to kind of move from being an emerging to learning and developing, and how can we kind of turn that into some kind of pathway or roadmap to kind of becoming a more data mature organisation. So we go to the next slide. This was kind of our overall kind of scores that we self-scored when we did the maturity assessment. Now, I'll go into a wee bit of detail around usage just to kind of show, but it's quite handy to kind of be able to kind of very quickly look and go, well, on this, we scored ourselves pretty well, which we kind of realized very quickly that we were maybe overestimating our ability within the data space, which made sense when we looked at who we'd asked to do the assessment. So we were asking people involved in governance, people involved in the technical aspects, managing the data services, the data owners, and the key data users. So we were people also who worked in insight and people who worked in performance. So these people were actually quite mature in their understanding of data. They were they understood what they did pretty well, and they were pretty confident in that space. I think if we'd broadened it out, we would have probably scored a bit lower. So we took that into consideration when we kind of took forward the results. We almost said, like, there is a wee bit of pinch of salt here. We have to be aware that we maybe are a bit behind what we think we are in terms of this assessment. Next slide. And this is what we did with it then. So if we took uses, we kind of indicated on the left-hand side, look, this is where we think we are based on the scores, based on the model, the framework. And if we want to take this forward and we want to kind of move and be more mature, here are 4 things that we think that we need to kind of invest in. So we want to be more strategic in using our data. We want to be able to use data to be more predictive, so we can understand the future challenges of the organization more effectively. We want to be able to pose questions with our data, much more what-if analysis. And we want to make real-time decisions rather than decisions being made at a service level based on events that have happened 3, 6, 12 months ago. We kind of want it to be as close to near time as possible, and these things will allow us to be much more mature in our use of data within the organization. And if you go to the next slide, so this is kind of what we thought was really useful about this whole exercise. Was it then allowed us to build a pack, allowed us to build a business case and a report that we took up to our executive board. It allowed us to articulate the data challenges that existed in the organisation in a way that the business could understand without having to be a data expert. And it allowed us to kind of put forward to them like a roadmap of the things that we think we need to do in order to kind of move the organisation forward. So it wasn't just about saying, well, it'd be nice to be thinking about being predictive in our use of data. It was about saying, well, we actually need to look at the people that exist in the organisation and their roles. We need to make data a part of their role. We need to make sure that's all the way up the organisation, from people who are inputting the data to realise that it is critical that they input the data correctly at that point, rather than that we're fixing it later on. From managers realising what the data is telling them in order to make better decisions, from leaders to then looking at predictive data or insights or any kind of analysis they're getting from data in order to make better decisions about the service offerings that we're kind of making going forward. So we kind of just mapped this into a kind of a 3-year program of work that we would undergo in order to kind of start to kind of move the organization forward, looking at it from an infrastructure point of view, which is very much around the kind of technical, from an organizational point of view, and then we kind of thought we'd run some kind of projects in order to kind of make sure that we're learning that what we're putting in place is actually working for us. And this kind of tied in nicely with the work that we're going to be doing with the ESES stuff. So that's kind of whistle stop tour. I think if anybody was interested in kind of a bit more detail about what we actually got out of our results, I'm quite happy to kind of pick that up with them individually.